The war on bikies seems to have hit a roadblock in the form of Supreme Court Justice George Freiberg. The Premier had railed against judges who were allowing alleged bikies out on bail, only to have a public rebuke from the Supreme Court Justice. Campbell Newman's tough new laws seem to have extensive public support, and controversially, the support of the independent chairman of the Crime and Misconduct Commission. One man uniquely placed to comment on all this is Gary Crooke. He was the counsel assisting in the Fitzgerald Inquiry and the Wood Royal Commission. He later became Queensland's Integrity Commissioner and the head of the National Crime Authority. Gary Crooke, the Premier has compared the need for this crackdown on the bikies to the need for the Fitzgerald Inquiry. How do you compare the two?
There's one very basic similarity, and that is the Fitzgerald Inquiry demonstrated and railed against inappropriate use of executive power. There is a comparison.
You're saying that the Premier is guilty of the same abuse of executive power?
Yes.
In what way?
In a way where he has brought in draconian measures that deal with a problem that certainly has to be dealt with. But one has to be measured in what one does here, and one just has to look at what the reaction has been to see whether it is, in effect, over the top and an overuse of the power that is residing in the executive. But more particularly, the strident urgings that if the court doesn't do what the government says it wants, then the court is not doing its job.
So that was, the Premier said that the judges should come out of their ivory tower and that they're out of touch. Is that what you're talking about? Well,
certainly the Premier said that, but this ivory tower of which he speaks is the tower that stands between the citizen and the executive government and is the very foundation of our liberty.
I'm interested in that because Justice Freiberg said, I'm going to halt this whole bail hearing of this bikie because of the perception that the Premier's marks could create that he might have been bending to the will of the government. But the alternative argument surely is that Justice Freiberg's big enough and ugly enough and independent enough to put all those considerations aside.
Perception is everything in this sort of thing. It is what the reasonable member of the public, properly informed, would think of the proceedings if, on the one hand, there was this strident urging by the spokesman for the government, and if the judge, acting judiciously, was minded to refuse bail. Yes, that perception could very well arise.
On the issue of independence and perception, you've got the chairman of the CMC, Ken Levy, praising the Premier and the Attorney-General, saying they've taken the strong action that was required. What do you think of that from an independent member of the CMC?
Yes, well, the CMC is founded on being an independent watchdog and may have to deal with actions of the government in a way that's quite stern. And it's most important that it is seen and perceived to be entirely independent of the government and the wishes of the government so that it can fulfil its independent role.
Was it a mistake for Ken Levy to buy into this?
I think so.
Do you think he should stand down?
Oh, look, that's nothing to do with me. It's a question for mature consideration.
For a few years you were the head of the National Crime Authority, so you would have considered these sorts of laws against bikies. Are they effective?
No.
So outlawing bikie gangs, does it work?
No, you don't need to be Perry Mason to change the name of the Black Ewlands to the Donald Duck Society, and then when they catch up with the Donald Duck Society it becomes the Mickey Mouse Society, and all these sort of things scratch superficially at the problem. The problem is criminal activity, but that's not what this issue is all about. We're talking about a reaction that includes a suite of reactions, the speedy passing of the legislation, the interference with bail, and now the imposition of draconian penalties without any regard to proportionality. It's these add-ons that bespeak hysteria about let's lock them up in some special prison behind closed doors, solitary confinement for 21 hours a day, wear pink clothing. What does this sound like? Is this Australia?
Is it effective? Is that kind of punishment effective?
Well, I can't see how it is. Death penalties aren't effective, and it's just hard to envisage sitting there, however extreme you are, to think what it would be like to be locked up for 25 years in those conditions. And as I keep saying, is this Australia that this is happening in? And why does it happen only in Queensland? Why?
All right, Gary Crooke, unfortunately we're out of time, but thank you for being on 7:30 Queensland.
Okay.
And we again asked both the Premier and the Attorney-General to come on the program, but they were unavailable.